Hello, I'm Asif Farouk of Finextra and we're here at the Swift Standards event, The Future of Financial Standards. I'm here with James Whittle of the ISO 20022 and UK Payments Council. James, what are some of the biggest challenges in implementing ISO 20022?
Sure. ISO 20022 is a global standard and there is a great deal of traction in many markets out there in terms of implementation, but we've got to be really clear, and I keep saying this time and time again, that as an international standard, there's a process that we engage in internationally to define the common recipe, if you like, of how we would develop standards that we can share. And then there's the process of implementation. And the two are not the same. They are distinctly different. And if we look close to us here in terms of the European model with SEPA, that's actually a very good example of how we'll go through that. So SEPA is based on a common set of internationally defined messages under the ISO 20022 framework, so they can be reused, they're well documented, and then in terms of implementation, the industry has a very good and strong collaborative model of coming together and defining what we would call rule books or message implementation guides or market practice of the detail of how those messages are used in the context that's defined by SEPA. And certainly in terms of the implementation of 20022 domestically in the UK for payments, which is my background, then we follow the same logic. So the implementation of 20022 messages for the purposes that we are using them, for the account switching service, for example, that we've launched recently, that's defined again in an implementation guide that we use domestically and defines our business context, rules and documents all of that so that we can be clear the difference between international standardization, where you need to agree common business semantics, business understanding, and how you then use those common building blocks, the Lego building blocks if you like, in the practical application between business participants and end users in a system. The two are different, and therefore some of what we hear that is 20022, ISO 20022, a one-size-fits-all approach, no. Of course it is not, because the world is complicated and businesses have many different requirements in financial services, and therefore what we need to do is provide that break point between what we need to standardise internationally and get that commonality, the building blocks, and how we use those building blocks to construct the buildings that are suitable for our own purposes. So that is in essence the key, if you like, to having a clear and consistent level of documentation. And very recently at ISO we have been discussing what level of exposure and transparency and communication ISO, the brand of ISO, should represent around those market-led implementations. And we've reached a very good level of understanding, which we will agree very soon in May this year, around a transparent approach for lay interested parties to approach ISO, understand in countries and in markets what is being implemented from an ISO point of view, and also to be able to pass through very seamlessly in terms of information through to market implementation guides, market practices that are also described. So the key there is for interested parties and for participants in markets, users, to be able to get hold of that information at every level. So we hope that we have a very good and clear communication basis to be able to communicate at those various levels.
And can you tell us about your relationship with regulators? Do you think they're sufficiently involved in the standardisation process?
The relationship with regulators is a very good one, and it has developed very well over the last 2 years. The work that we've done on the legal entity identifier under ISO has really been quite groundbreaking in that regard. What has worked really well is actually spending time through the vehicle of the Financial Stability Board to understand how regulators can benefit from industry standards and what they need to feel comfortable about in terms of that industry standards process to be able to rely on it. So there's an awful lot of what we needed to go through, which was actually foundational kind of communication and governance of ISO is a trusted brand, has a process that's well proven, that works on a global basis, is open in terms of participation, and also is proven in many industries other than just financial services. Because essentially the key thrust of what we needed to get through with the regulators, and that's the real success that we've achieved, is it's a complementary relationship. So Regulators at the outset were of the opinion that they write standards, they write rules, so why do they need to work with an industry standardisation process like ISO, which for some of them appeared to be rather conflicting with what they do. What we've worked through with them is actually they write standards in terms of rules. What we effectively write is technical standards in terms of how to implement those rules. So what we've flushed out, if you like, and I think that's the very firm foundation for the future, is that if regulators can focus on what it is they're trying to achieve, we as the industry can complement that by working out the best way to achieve it in the implementation of standards. So we've made very good headway in that regard.